Have you ever wondered why, even surrounded by friends, you still feel invisible? It's like no one really sees you, right? As if people only love a part of you, the part you show, the part that's easiest to swallow. But deep down, when you're alone in your room, late at night, the question comes back to haunt you. What if no one likes the real me? Perhaps this is the most painful truth. Carl Jung forced us to see you were never truly accepted, because no one ever knew who you really are. Sit here with me. Let's talk about it. From a very young age, you were taught to hide, not with words, but with cold stares, with subtle rebukes, with hugs that came only when you did everything right. So you learned being yourself isn't enough. And to avoid losing the love of others, you created someone easier to love, another you, tailor-made to please. You began to wear a mask. Jung called this mask person. He explained, a persona is someone you believe you are, but you are not. At first it seems like just protection, a shield to keep from getting hurt. But over time, it sticks to your skin. You forget who's underneath, and it isolates you, even if no one notices. Look at the people around you, your closest friends. How many of them really know you? How many have seen your anger, your envy, your loneliness? How many have seen that side you're too embarrassed to show? It's uncomfortable to admit, but many don't. Maybe none, because you're caught in a silent game, a masquerade. You pretend to be who they want you to be, and they pretend too. You applaud each other, but you don't touch each other. Jung said that the persona is necessary. After all, without it, life in society would be impossible. But when it completely dominates, we forget ourselves. We become the role we play. Becoming aware of the persona, he wrote, it's the first step to freeing yourself from the paper that consumes us. And when that doesn't happen, friendship becomes just a contract, a superficial exchange of favors and fake smiles. You've felt this, haven't you? You've trusted someone who, in the end, only wanted something in return. You've been betrayed by someone who promised to always be by your side. You've realized that that affectionate embrace was in fact self-interest. It wasn't a coincidence. It was because you never showed yourselves completely to each other. Because you were both defending your masks, afraid to reveal what lay beneath. And what lies beneath isn't just ugly. Beneath it lies pain, shadow, but also truth. There's the beauty of being human, of being real. But we only discover this when we have the courage to take off the mask, even while trembling inside. Because the mask protects, but it also imprisons. Maybe you haven't realized it yet, but this loneliness that hurts so much isn't just others' fault for not accepting you. It's because you don't accept yourself. You don't have the courage to show yourself completely. You don't allow yourself to be seen. And this is where your life can begin to change. Take a deep breath. Start slowly. Notice when you're just acting. Notice that forced smile when you wanted to cry. That help you offered out of fear of rejection if you said no. That okay you said to avoid conflict, even though your soul was bleeding inside. And little by little, take off the mask, even if it's just for yourself, in front of the mirror. Look at yourself courageously. See who you are behind the facade. Recognize your own shadows, your flaws, but also your light. Because only then will you be whole enough for someone, one day, to have the chance to see who you truly are. It's hard, it's scary, but it's the only path to real intimacy, to friendships that aren't just a show. And if no one has ever told you this before, I'll say it now. You deserve to be accepted exactly as you are. But for that to happen, you need to have the courage to show up. As Jung wrote, he who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakens. So wake up, someone somewhere is waiting to meet you. But what if I told you that what you hide behind that mask is not only your pain, but also your shadow? And that it is precisely this denied part that sabotages your relationships, that makes you feel alone, even when you are not. Carl Jung called this in the shade, and it is even more dangerous because it acts without you noticing. Talking about the shadow is uncomfortable. I know, because it carries exactly everything you'd rather pretend doesn't exist within you. selfishness, envy, anger, pride, fear, everything that doesn't fit the image you want to project to the world. But the problem is, just because you don't look at it, doesn't mean it disappears. Quite the opposite. The shadow only grows in the dark. Jung said it like this: what you do not bring to consciousness comes back to you in the form of destiny. And it's true. How many times have you found yourself repeating the same patterns? Getting involved with people who hurt you, being drawn into friendships that use you, sabotaging yourself in important moments. Well, yes, this isn't just bad luck. This is your shadow choosing for you. See, every time you repress something inside yourself, believing it's ugly, unacceptable, wrong, that part hides deep in your unconscious. But it doesn't disappear. It just changes places. And when you least expect it, it emerges. Sometimes in an untimely fit of rage, sometimes in a need that seems insatiable, sometimes in a jealousy that destroys your friendships. The shadow also plays a cruel trick. It makes you see in others what you don't want to see in yourself. Have you ever noticed how the people who irritate you the most often carry traits that, deep down, are yours too? You point the finger at that selfish friend, but you're afraid to admit your own selfishness. You distance yourself from that needy friend, but you deny your own need for care. This is the shadow's projection, and until you look at it within yourself, you'll continue to see it in everyone around you. And that's how relationships become an invisible battlefield. You think you're fighting with the other person, but you're actually fighting with parts of yourself you don't want to accept. You think you're hurt by your friend, but deep down you're hurting yourself for being human, for not being perfect. Jung taught that the only way to stop this cycle is to look at one's shadow, not to judge it, but to know it, to integrate it. He said the shadow is only dangerous when unrecognized. And that's exactly it. When you have the courage to face your ugly impulses, your difficult feelings, your flaws, they stop controlling you from behind the scenes. And the beautiful thing is that the shadow isn't made up of only bad things. No, it also holds talents you left behind because someone, at some point, made you believe you weren't good enough. It holds your spontaneity, your courage, your sensuality, your creative strength. You hid all of this to be accepted, but this is also you. And only when you reclaim these parts do you become whole. And when you become whole, you stop demanding that others be perfect too. You begin to accept their shadows because you've learned to accept yours. And that's the only way true intimacy is born, when two people stop hiding their ugly halves and have the courage to see each other whole. So I ask you, are you willing to truly look at yourself, to see your own darkness, to reclaim what you've lost along the way? I know it hurts, but it also frees. You don't have to do this alone. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes I'll guide you even deeper into this journey of self-discovery. And if this already resonates with you, sign up now so you don't miss the next reflections. We'll go together, without fear of the shadow, because only those who look within can awaken. Perhaps the hardest part isn't accepting that you have a shadow, but realizing how it turns others into distorted mirrors, where you only see what you want to deny in yourself. Carl Jung called this projection, and perhaps nothing keeps us as far from true intimacy as this invisible mechanism we carry around every day. It's cruel, but true. We don't see people as they are. We see them as we are inside, full of fears, forbidden desires, unresolved weaknesses. Every time you point your finger at someone and say, "How arrogant he is," or "She is so manipulative," or "That kind of people irritate me," maybe you are seeing what you refuse to see in the mirror. Have you ever noticed how sometimes someone gets on your nerves for a reason that doesn't even make sense? A small quirk, a silly comment, an innocent gesture, and suddenly, there you are, drenched in anger or contempt. It's your shadow projecting itself. The other person is just being who they are, but you see in them the hidden side of yourself. And it's not just the bad things, it's also the fascination. That person you idolize, who you put on a pedestal, who you think is perfect, probably carries within them talents and strengths that you also have, but never had the courage to live. That's why they enchant you so much. They express aloud what inside you still lives silently. Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But almost no one has the courage to do this. It's much easier to blame others, judge others, run away from others, than to admit, what bothers me about him is exactly what I can't stand about myself." And that's why friendships become a minefield of misunderstandings and disappointments. You start to see the other person not for who they are, but for what you inflict on them without realizing it. The friend who always needs help may just be someone showing you how much you deny your own need for care. The friend who talks too much may just be someone who reminds you how you eat your words. The colleague who never commits may be showing you your own hidden cowardice. And on the other hand, the person you fall in love with platonically may be holding up the mirror to your own creativity, your own freedom, your own courage that you left behind somewhere along the way. But projection is treacherous, because at first, it's intoxicating. It makes you feel intensely connected, as if you found someone who fills exactly what's missing. Until one day the spell is broken, and everything positive you projected begins to turn into disappointment. The perfect person turns out to be human, and you feel betrayed. But the truth is, it wasn't they who deceived you, it was you who deceived yourself, because you never saw the real person, only the canvas on which you painted your own colors. And this also happens with wounds. How many times have you walked away from someone because you couldn't stand their way, without realizing it was just your own rejected side that was showing up? The truth is, until we look at our projections, we remain trapped in a lonely theater, where no one is ever truly who they are. Jung explained that projections don't disappear on their own. They need to be forcibly removed, not from the other person, but from ourselves. It's painful, of course, because when you remove your projection, you have to face what it was hiding. Pride, fear, envy, anger, fragility. Everything you said wasn't yours, but only then can you begin to see the other person as they truly are. Only then can you stop turning relationships into a broken mirror and finally open your eyes to the truth of the person around you. Because in the end, that is the essence of intimacy. Seeing the other not as an extension of what you lack, nor as an enemy of what you deny in yourself, but as someone whole and imperfect, just like you. And perhaps you'll discover, when you collect all your projections, that people were never as good or as bad as you thought. They were just being themselves, while you insisted on seeing your own shadow in them. Maybe it's time to stop running away from the mirror, because until you do, every face you encounter will be just a distorted reflection of your own. When you begin to collect your projections and look at your shadow, something even more disturbing emerges. The feeling that even when you think you're being yourself, you're still following a script you didn't write. It's as if your personality, your choices, your fears and desires aren't yours alone. Carl Jung called this collective unconscious a vast psychological ocean that connects you to all of humanity, shaping you from within, without asking permission. Deep down, you think you're unique, that you're original, that your friendships, likes and dislikes are the result of your personal history, but they're not. Behind the mask and the shadow, you still carry an ancestral script inherited from generations upon generations. And that's why, often, the friendships you choose, the roles you play in groups, the cycles you repeat, always seem the same, as if they were stronger than your will. Jung discovered this by observing symbols, patterns, and stories that repeated themselves in patients from different cultures who had never met. They were the same myths, the same primal fears, the same archetypal images, and he understood there is a deeper layer of the unconscious, where we are all connected. It is from this that archetypes, these invisible figures that inhabit our interior and that determine how we behave. Have you ever noticed how, in almost every group, there's always someone who takes on the role of leader, someone who becomes the rebel, someone who carries the burden of being the peacemaker, and someone who always ends up as the scapegoat? It's no coincidence. These are archetypal roles, patterns that emerge because our collective unconscious knows exactly how to organize them. And without realizing it, you end up wearing one of these roles and believing it to be who you are. And this creates a false sense of belonging, Because you are accepted, yes, but because of the role you play, not because of who you truly are. And to maintain that acceptance, you fit in. You bend, you forget your individuality. You think you're experiencing true friendships, but in reality, you're participating in an old human drama, playing a character everyone already knows. The scariest thing is that the collective unconscious doesn't just appear in these social roles. It also manifests itself in moments when you find yourself overcome by feelings or ideas that seem to come from nowhere. The irrational fear of being excluded, the urge to follow the crowd, the feeling of needing to belong at any cost. These are all traces of the collective unconscious speaking through you. This is why so many friendships, though lasting, are never truly intimate, because they are based not on a genuine encounter between two unique people, but on the encounter between two archetypal roles. You connect with what the other person represents to you in that invisible script, and they do the same with you. And so, no one ever truly sees each other. Jung said that awakening to this is fundamental to individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. Because until you realize you're being guided by collective standards, you'll continue to confuse yourself with them. You'll believe you're just the funny one, or the wise one, or the savior, when in fact you are much more than any label. The hard part is that breaking these patterns hurts, because being yourself outside of the roles others expect of you can mean losing the group's acceptance. It can mean being seen as strange, out of place. And we have an immense fear of not belonging. But Jung also reminded us that belonging without being yourself is just an elegant form of loneliness. You're surrounded by people, but no one sees you. They only see the role, and you behind the role remain invisible. So before you accept what's expected of you, look inside and ask yourself, who am I when I'm not trying to please anyone? Who am I when no one is looking at me? Who am I when I dare to be just me? This questioning isn't easy, but it's the first step toward breaking the chains of the collective unconscious and finally reconnecting with your own essence. When you do this, your friendships change too, because now they can be built not on paper, but on truth. And if this reflection touched you, leave a sign here, a silent like, just so I know this message found someone willing to look within, because it's with this courage that everything begins. When you finally begin to recognize the roles the collective unconscious has placed in your hands, something shifts. A restlessness begins to emerge. It's as if for the first time, you dare to step off the path already laid out for you, and suddenly, you no longer know where to go. This is the hardest part of awakening, discovering that being yourself has a price, and not everyone will want to pay to be by your side when you decide to be who you truly are. Because people have grown accustomed to your mask. They've learned to love the character you play. Perhaps they even depend on that character to maintain the balance of their own masks. So when you start to strip it away, to show your shadow, to refuse collective roles, many will turn away. Some will feel betrayed. Others will call you selfish, ungrateful, or strange. But none of this reflects who you are. It only shows how much they are still trapped in their own patterns. Jung spoke about this with brutal honesty. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And by becoming someone who looks into their own soul, you end up becoming a threat to those who aren't ready to do the same. You become an uncomfortable mirror for them, because your courage exposes their cowardice. Your truth exposes the lie they hide behind. And here's a wound few have the courage to face. Not every friendship survives your individuation process. Not every relationship can withstand your authenticity. There are people who only stayed by your side because you conveniently fit their needs. And now that you no longer fit, they feel uncomfortable, and they leave. This pain is real. It's the pain of realizing that many of the bonds you swore were deep were just silent agreements between two masks. You promised not to show your truth, and they promised to love you that way. When your truth emerges, this invisible pact shatters, and everything solid seems to crumble. But this pain is also necessary, because it's only through it that you learn to differentiate who truly loves you, and not just the convenient version you offered. Few will remain, but those few those will love you completely. Not just the light, but also the shadow. Not just the role, but the essence. This is the price of being yourself, losing conditioned love to, one day, deserve true love. This is the inevitable silence between the mask you abandon and the new circle you will create. And it is lonely, yes, but it is a different kind of loneliness. It is no longer the loneliness of being invisible among many. It is the loneliness of finally seeing yourself, even if no one else is looking. Jung called this process of separation from the crowd individuation. He knew that being yourself often meant moving away from the expectations others projected onto you, and that this was painful, put forth, but he also knew it was the only path to inner freedom. Because as long as you depend on masks to be loved, you'll never know what it's like to be truly accepted. So don't be alarmed when you realize some people don't recognize you anymore. Don't be alarmed when they start looking at you strangely, or when the invitations disappear, or when the smiles turn cold. It's not you who's changed so much. It's just that now you've become someone they don't have the courage to be. In the end, the price of being yourself always seems too high at first. But then you realize that all you lost were chains disguised as hugs, and that all you gain is priceless. The peace of finally being able to exist without apologies. Because when you dare to be whole, your whole life changes to welcome you. And those who stay, they deserve to know who you truly are. After the masks fall, after you realize who leaves and who stays, a silence ensues. Not an external silence, but an internal silence. An emptiness that's always been there, but that you can only feel now that you're no longer occupied with the performance. Now that you're no longer distracted by trying to fit into someone else's mold. It's uncomfortable. It's like entering a dark room of your own soul, the one you've avoided visiting your entire life. This emptiness isn't a punishment, it's an invitation. An invitation to finally discover who you are without anyone watching, without expectations to fulfill, without applause to receive. Carl Jung spoke of this as the inevitable journey for anyone who wants to truly find themselves. Because only after you detach yourself from others can you hear your own voice. Only that voice doesn't sound like you expect. At first she's weak, hesitant, full of uncertainty. You ask yourself, what if I'm not enough? What if no one likes the real me? What if I have nothing to offer without the masks? These questions are natural. Because for years you confused your worth with your usefulness to others, the image you projected, the role you played in groups. And now, without all of that, you feel naked, fragile, lost. But it is in this very place that individuation begins, in nothingness, in absence. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And this feeling of emptiness is nothing more than your unconscious calling out to you, asking you to illuminate it, asking you to stop looking for answers outside and start looking within. It's also here that you realize how relationships before filled this hole superficially. Friendships that felt more like contracts, conversations that were just noise to avoid listening to your own heart, smiles that were just distractions to avoid feeling the pain of what was missing. Without these superficial bonds, you find yourself forced to face loneliness, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. And solitude teaches you. It teaches you that you're much deeper than you imagined. It teaches you that there are emotions you never let surface because you were too busy being nice. It teaches you that there are desires you shelved because you were afraid they wouldn't be accepted. It teaches you that your soul has many more layers than you believed. But to find them, you have to stay, even when it hurts, even when it seems like there's nothing there. This emptiness is not your absence. It is the space where your essence can finally appear. And little by little, you realize it's not so dark after all. You begin to feel a sense of relief, a lightness in not having to pretend, a certain pride in holding on even when no one else is around. You realize you're no longer chasing other people's approval like someone begging for love. You're learning to be self-sufficient. And then, slowly, you realize that this inner silence is fertile. It's soil. It's a cradle. It's from here that the seeds of who you truly are sprout. because only those who have the courage to traverse the dark night of the soul are able to discover their own light. People around you will find it strange. Some will say you're cold, distant, strange. But that's not the case at all. You're just whole. And those who are used to dealing with their halves will have a hard time accepting that. But that doesn't matter so much anymore. Because now you know true loneliness isn't being without others. It's being without yourself. And that emptiness you feel isn't loneliness. It's you coming home. When you cross this void and begin to inhabit your own essence, a new perception emerges. You are not as alone as you seemed. There have always been people around you living the same silence hidden beneath smiling masks. There have always been hearts weary of acting, souls suffocated within roles. The difference is that now you begin to perceive these souls, because now you are no longer afraid to see in them the shadow you once recognized within yourself. And this is powerful, because without realizing it, you become a mirror for those who haven't yet had the courage to look within. You don't need to say anything. You don't need to preach anything. Your mere presence bothers some, but inspires others. Your authenticity creates a kind of crack in the theater of others, and some will run away. It's true, but others will feel relief, because they will see in you living proof that it is possible to be whole without being perfect. But being a mirror requires courage, because most people prefer not to see. Jung said, "He who looks outside dreams, but he who looks inside awakens." And those who aren't ready to awaken resist. Resist you. Resist what you represent. And so they'll project onto you everything they still don't accept in themselves. They'll call you cold. They'll call you arrogant. They'll say you've changed, as if that were a bad thing. But the truth is, you've only stopped living in a state of slumber. The hardest part is when this resistance comes from the people you love. Sometimes, the people you care about most are the ones who feel most threatened by your process, because your change forces others to realize they can change too. And not everyone is willing. So you become a silent nuisance, a constant reminder of what still needs to be done. So don't expect applause for becoming who you are. Don't expect immediate understanding. Don't expect everyone you love to join you on this journey. Not everyone has the same courage. Not everyone has the same hunger for truth. And that's okay. Everyone has their own time. But there is something you can do. Stay. Be true to yourself. Don't give in to the temptation to put the mask back on just to please. Don't shrink back into roles that no longer serve you, because it's by remaining whole that you give others permission to do the same. It's by sustaining your silence, your light, and your shadow that you show. Without words, it's also safe to be you. And little by little, some people begin to reach out. People who are also tired of the theater, who also miss soulful conversations, relationships that aren't based solely on convenience, friendships that endure both light and darkness. And then suddenly you realize loneliness begins to give way to something deeper, a kind of encounter you never imagined possible, an encounter between truths, not masks. These connections don't happen quickly. They're not for everyone, but they are real, and real is enough. So don't be afraid to be a mirror. Don't be afraid to be the first to speak about your shadow in a room full of people smiling to hide their pain. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable, because your courage doesn't just transform you, it also paves the way for others. If you've ever felt this way, if you've ever experienced the discomfort of being a reflection for others, tell us below. Comment what you saw when you looked into the mirror of your soul, because your story could also be the crack someone needs to begin to see their own truth. Over time, something curious happens. Now you're no longer as surprised when someone walks away. You no longer blame yourself so much when your choices disappoint others' expectations. And you no longer feel that urge to prove anything to anyone. After crossing the void, after enduring loneliness and facing the shadow, you begin to discover a different peace, the peace of no longer needing to be perfect. At first it feels strange, even uncomfortable, because all your life, you believed you were only worthy of love if you fit the mold, if you were pleasant, trustworthy, tirelessly correct. The fear of failure was what made you fold in on yourself, hide entire pieces of your soul, swallow truths, so as not to hurt anyone. But now you begin to realize that no one has ever loved you completely while you tried to be perfect, because perfection isn't human, and no one connects with a smooth, flawless mask. Jung used to say that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but rather by becoming conscious of darkness. This is what you are experiencing now, the awareness that it is your imperfection that makes you human, that makes you capable of truly loving and being loved. The cracks, the flaws, the mistakes, they are what allow the light to enter, and little by little, you begin to notice how perfectionism contaminated your relationships. You wanted to be the friend who always said yes, who never made a mistake, who was always available, who never failed. You were proud of this, but you felt exhausted. Because deep down, you knew there was no room for yourself in this equation. And the cruelest part is realizing that even though you did your best to be everything to everyone, there was still rejection, still criticism, still abandonment. That's when you understand, no matter how hard you try, you'll never fit into the ideal they've created for you. And honestly, why should you? It's not your responsibility to carry others' projections of who you should be. It's not fair to you to keep amputating pieces of yourself to please audiences who are never satisfied. You're not a spectacle, you're a person. This awareness changes everything, because when you stop pretending to be perfect, you free others to stop pretending too. When you allow yourself to fail, to get tired, to say no, to be vulnerable, you open space for truer, more human, lighter relationships. Friendships that aren't based on performance, but on acceptance. Partners who don't just come to benefit from your strength, but who also hold you up when you fall apart. And maybe, for the first time, you can breathe, because now you no longer need to watch every word, every gesture, every choice, for fear of displeasing. You realize that those who like you for who you are, stay, and those who don't, aren't missed, because they didn't really like you, just the role you played. This peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's not a life without problems, but it's the tranquility that arises when you understand that you don't have to be invulnerable to be worthy of love, that you don't have to be flawless to deserve respect, that you don't have to be impeccable to belong. And that's where the most beautiful connections begin to happen. Because from the moment you allow yourself to be human, you can also see humanity in others. You stop demanding perfection from those around you. You stop being disappointed by their flaws, because now you understand that you carry your own too. And this creates a new way of being together, more patient, kinder, more genuine. In the end, it's this. No one is looking for a flawless statue to love. People just want to find someone with whom they can be themselves. And only when you accept who you are, imperfect, incomplete, but real, are you able to offer that same freedom to others. This peace isn't noisy, it's quiet. It comes when you stop chasing approval and start walking at your own pace. It comes when you understand you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. It comes when you finally look in the mirror and say, I am enough, even so. And then, as this peace begins to settle in your chest, something even deeper reveals itself. You discover that you no longer need to beg for love. You begin to realize that for most of your life, you confused affection with approval. You confused belonging with submission. You confused intimacy with need. This is where you begin to understand what Jung meant when he spoke of the essential loneliness of the human being, and how it is not a curse, but a natural state of freedom. Because before, everything in you was driven by the fear of loss. You accepted crumbs so as not to be alone. You shrank to fit in. You smiled so as not to scare anyone. You did everything to keep others close, even if it meant losing yourself, even if it made you invisible to yourself. And now you realize, no one can fill you. No friends, no love, no applause, not really, because that hunger you felt wasn't for others. It was for yourself. It was to rediscover that part of you that was left behind, buried under years of masks, personas, roles that weren't yours. This is where you begin to love differently. A way that's no longer urgent, no longer desperate, no longer dependent. A love that neither binds nor allows itself to be bound. You begin to see people, not as saviors, not as enemies, not as audiences, but as they are, whole, imperfect beings, equally frightened, equally human. And that changes everything. Because now, you no longer stay where you're not welcome. Now you don't beg for emotional crumbs just to avoid sleeping alone. Now you don't offer up pieces of yourself to buy company. You don't need it. You already have yourself. This is the hardest and most liberating lesson of all. Love is a verb that only makes sense when it begins within you. Jung wrote, "Loneliness doesn't come from not having people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." And when you finally manage to communicate with yourself, loneliness changes its tone. It no longer hurts like before. It's no longer despair. It becomes a safe space, a refuge. And from then on, everything that comes, friends, partners, dates, is no longer a necessity. It's a choice. You no longer need anyone to come and save you from your own life. You no longer need anyone to tell you you're worth it. You already know, and because you already know, you can offer a different kind of love too. A love that doesn't suffocate, that doesn't demand, that doesn't turn the other into a mirror for yourself. A love that respects the other's journey, the other's shadows, the other's limits. Because now you understand that each person carries their own invisible battle, and you no longer harbor the illusion that you can or should save them from it. You begin to see people come and go without it destroying your peace. You begin to realize that no one belongs to anyone else, and that all we can do is walk together for a while. When our journeys intersect, you begin to experience lighter, more honest, more human relationships. And that doesn't mean you don't love, quite the opposite. You love more and better, because now it's no longer to fill a void. Now it's because you overflow. You don't cling. You don't lose yourself. You don't fade out of fear of abandonment, because you've already found yourself. This kind of love that doesn't depend on anything is rare, and it can frighten those still trapped in the game of masks and expectations. But it's the only one that sets you free, because only when you don't need anyone to feel whole can you finally choose who deserves to walk by your side. And only then do connections stop being chains and become bridges, one that unites two souls without either needing to bend to fit inside the other. And then you get here, at that point where everything starts to make sense. When you look back at the person you were at the beginning of this journey, and you almost don't recognize them. That version of you, so busy trying to please, so scared of disappointing, so dependent on approval, no longer lives here. Because now you understand that being whole has always been more important than being accepted. This awareness is rare. It's a privilege. Not everyone has the courage to get this far, and you did. You had the courage to face your masks and let them fall. You had the courage to enter the darkness of your own shadow and get to know it. You had the courage to face loneliness and learn to be with it, in peace. You dared to let go of the roles the collective unconscious had stuck on you. You dared to disappoint those who only saw your performance and not your truth. And that's precisely why you're no longer the same. Today, you don't ask for permission to exist. You don't beg for love. You don't diminish yourself to fit anyone's mold. Today, you understand that your essence is non-negotiable, that your soul is not for sale, that your light and your darkness are equally yours and equally beautiful. Now you can love without fear. Now you can lose without falling apart. Now you can be alone without feeling abandoned, because you've learned that the love that truly counts doesn't come from outside, it's born from within. And because it's born from within, no one can take it away from you. This is the freedom Jung described when he spoke of individuation, the process of becoming who you were born to be. He said, "What you resist persists. What you accept transforms." And now you understand that accepting your own humanity was what transformed everything. You no longer need to be perfect to be loved. You no longer need to hide your flaws to be worthy. You no longer need to swallow your pain to be accepted. Because you finally realized those who deserve to walk by your side won't leave when they see your shadow. Those who deserve you won't just want your smile. They'll also know how to hold your hand on dark days. And from today on, your relationships change. Because you've changed. Because you no longer allow the superficiality of masks, projections, and illusions. Now you want soul, you want depth, you want truth. You want people who truly see you, just as you can now see others. So take a deep breath and realize, everything you sought in others was already within you. And nothing, and no one, can ever take it away from you again. And if this journey touched you, if you feel like something in you has already begun to change, just by hearing these words, I want to invite you to continue walking with me. Here we will always talk about this. About finding yourself, about being whole, about having the courage to be who you are. So subscribe now, like this video, and tell me in the comments what most impacted you on this reflection. I read everything, and each story you share here enriches this exchange and inspires others to take this step too. You deserve to feel the silent pride of someone who has finally found themselves. You deserve the lightness of someone who no longer needs to apologize for existing. And above all, you deserve to be seen. By yourself, first. And by all those who have eyes to see the truth. Feel privileged to have made it this far, because few have that courage. And now that you've arrived, never go back to the way you were before. Be whole, be you, and inspire others to do the same.